Hello and welcome to today's video, where I will be giving my own thoughts on how Rome could have won their civil war in Andrew02s wicso, and what I think would happen afterwards during the Great Dying Period. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, as I am trying to get 200 subscribers by the end of the month. Anyways, going into the scenario, we will actually be starting right after the Mare Nostrum War. During the war, Rome went into heavy debt fighting Carthage and also failed at protecting their ally France, even losing land to Germany, and the worst part of their lost land during the war was them giving independence to Bosnia, which started a domino effect across Rome, sparking several independence movements throughout the nation. All of this made Rome's people start losing hope in their nation and made Rome into a quickly declining power. So, in order to stop these problems and hopefully stop their decline, Rome will actually be focusing on having better relations with Morocco, eventually even making the cross-economic alliance with them, with this helping both countries' economies and making independence movements in Rome lose a lot of their followers. The second thing that will be changing in this timeline is that after Galicia annexes their puppet state, several Valentian rebellions, secretly funded by Morocco, will pop up across Galicia. The main reason I had this happen is because in our timeline Galicia was a big funder of Algeria and the rebellion in Catalonia. However, with them now distracted, that funding won't be happening anymore. However, even with the cross-economic alliance and halted funding by Galicia, rebels in Catalonia and eventually after being funded by Germany, also Slovenia, would still break out. However, with the cut funding by Galicia, stronger Roman economy and Morocco also supporting Rome, these rebellions wouldn't do nearly as well as they did in our timeline. But this doesn't deter Algeria, as they still join the war. They attempt a naval landing on Sicily, only for this to go horribly and for them to be pushed back immediately. After this, they attempt a second naval landing on Sardinia, with this one actually working and them getting a foothold on the island. With Algeria now in the war, Slovenia will still try to make a massive offensive into Rome, but just like in our timeline, this will go horribly, with Rome making a great counter-offensive, eventually destroying the Slovenian Revolution completely. Catalonia will still be able to push into Rome, taking a major city and parts of Rome's coastline. Around this point, thanks to spies in Germany, Rome is actually able to figure out about Germany funding the rebels in Slovenia, and to be able to make sure no more Slovenian rebels can pop up and that they have protection in case Germany decides to join the war. Rome will actually let the Catalonian rebellion get their independence. This is mainly because Catalonia is easily the strongest rebellious group in Rome at this point, and with Rome's people still being anti-war, this would be a good way of making less rebel groups pop up. Also, another reason I'm doing this is because I simply don't see it possible that Rome is able to fully win their civil war, thanks to how many sides the Romans were fighting. Looking over at Galicia, even though their rebels continue pushing in the south, they do eventually push back in the north. Another thing we see happen close to Iberia is Algeria taking the Balearic Islands. Looking over at Rome, they will be able to push Algeria out of Sardinia. Eventually Slovenia will still attempt to come back, but with far more Roman troops in the region they will fail. Seeing how bad Algeria is doing in the war, we see Carthage join Rome's side. In order to regain lands they lost to Algeria during the Mare Nostrum War. Even with Carthage being one of the weakest countries on the planet, they will still be able to push into Algeria thanks to them being distracted by Rome. But now something which was the main reason why Rome ended up losing the war in our timeline will be happening. Germany enters the war on Algeria's side. They will quickly invade into Rome, but thanks to Rome having more troops along their border, they won't be doing nearly as well as in our timeline. But even if they're not doing as well in the war, they're still far stronger than Rome at this point and could make Rome capitulate and lose the war. So, in order to help Rome and for them to not lose the war, we actually see Morocco enter the war on Rome's side. They will immediately blitz into Algeria and eventually, along with Carthage, will capitulate the country. However, with Morocco being focused on the war, we see Galicia be able to kick out their rebels in Valencia. One more thing we see happen that is bad for the Romans is that with Algeria being fully occupied, Carthage will leave the war, as they don't have good relations with either Rome or Morocco. Even with Moroccan troops now fighting in the north, Germany is still able to keep on pushing into Rome, so the Romans start quickly looking for ways they could distract the Germans and give Rome some more breathing space. And eventually they will be able to find this distraction as Sweden begins an invasion into the undefended German north. This is quickly followed by Dutch rebellions in the west, and after this Germany will begin to start collapsing. Polish rebellions will start in the east, and even Hungary will begin invading into Germany, making them finally sue for peace with Rome. So at the end of the war the map will be looking like this, and now we can finally take a look at the peace treaty. Starting off with Catalonia, we see them gaining their independence and a few border regions they claim. Moving over to Algeria, we see them being divided up by Carthage and Morocco, with Carthage taking more since it was originally their core territory. Now looking over at Germany, we see them being fully balkanized, with the Dutch and Polish gaining their independence. So after the war this is what Europe ends up looking like. However, now we will be looking more into the future and see how the Romans will be dealing with the Great Dying Period. Even with Rome winning their civil war, we still see Britain annexing France. Afterwards we see them still make the Square Economic Alliance, however this time with Carthage instead of Germany. To counter this, Galicia makes the Diamond Economic Alliance with Catalonia. However, while trying to get one over on the Square Economic Alliance, Galicia adds a new member, that being Bosnia. This eventually leads to the Cross Economic Alliance joining the economic war happening in Europe, adding most of the German states into the crosses, eventually making Greece join the Square Economic Alliance. We also see Russia invade into both Western Ukraine and the Yellow Polish country, annexing them both completely. Thanks to the economic war in Europe, once the plague pops up in northern Italy, it means that Western Europe is split into 3 parts, meaning that the plague could be even worse in this timeline. But since we are focusing on Rome right now, we will only be talking about their own ways of dealing with the plague. Since Rome is right in the heart of the plague, we see them for stability reasons be forced to give up or sell parts of their territory in order to not go into a second civil war. Thanks to both the plague and Rome funding rebels behind their people's backs, Britain's colony in France will begin collapsing as both Catalonia and the Dutch invade into it. Eventually even France breaks away from them and a peace treaty will be made looking like this. Other than that, we don't really see anything else change besides Sweden not collapsing thanks to Roman efforts to help them in their civil war. But this is where I will be stopping this scenario for now, as episode 18 hasn't yet been released by the time I'm making this video. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, as I will hopefully be making even more old history in the future.